Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. We got a lot of critical information that I need to share with you. Time is of the essence because this situation is so fluid and so fast-paced that we cannot possibly keep up with it. I print off my notes within the next hour. The whole story has changed, but I'm going to try to give you some of my best prognostications of what is coming in the future and what you need to prepare for. People say, Nate, isn't this a prepping channel? Isn't this not about current events? Well, one of the number one preps, and you can tell people this, one of the number one preps is your ability to acquire, to source, to sift through, decipher information. In the fog of war, it's one of your number one commodities and survival skills. And that's precisely because there's so much different disinformation, there's so much propaganda to sift through, that if you just know what is going to happen next, or if you can just get a clear sense of what is happening right now, that in itself puts you steps above the average person. And when it comes down to it, it's a game of musical chairs. Unfortunately, we can't save all the kitty cats. Not a lot of people are going to make it if the shizzy really does hit the fizzy, but you find people. I hope you have a head start with just being a part of this community. Now, one of the hot topics of today is the fact that Poland may be sending some of its old stock warplanes to Ukraine, or even letting Ukraine use Poland as a staging ground to do airstrikes in Ukraine or against Russian targets, be they in Belarus or whatever the case, even in Russia. Because remember, Ukraine is at war with Russia right now. So there's nothing stopping from Ukraine with actually attacking Russia. Not a lot of people have talked about that. If that happens, that's when this potentially goes existential from Russia's standpoint. Now, Russia has declared that if NATO gets involved in this kind of way, if they start sending these sort of heavy equipment, and you'll notice that so far they sent anti-tank missiles, they sent javelins, they haven't really sent a lot of heavy equipment. Warplanes, I think, are a red line for Russia. They stated that whether or not you send them or whether you let them, and especially if you let them use your countries as a staging ground, then that will be an act of war, and we will have to neutralize those targets. So I would suspect that if there was a deal that went through whereby Poland gave its old stock to Ukraine, and I guess there's an agreement that the U.S. is going to send F-16s to Poland to replenish their stock there. I guess their pilots are going to have to learn how to fly F-16s because they're all flying these big jets from the old Soviet Union. So that means that you may actually see a preemptive strike by Russia on these Polish aircraft, wherever they are, whichever hangar they're contained in. I'm sure Russia knows where they are. And of course, if this happens, that would be a full-on war between NATO and Russia. And then we are about 0.1 steps away from World War III. Let's hope it doesn't go that way. Now, there's also talk ratcheting up of enforcing a no-fly zone. And we keep hearing over and over again, we're not going to enforce a no-fly zone. We're not going to, but just the fact that it's in the media so much, just the fact that they're talking about it so much, and they're putting it into the public mindset, and apparently the majority of Americans, I think it was Full Spectrum who was talking about this, support enforcing a no-fly zone. So essentially that means that the majority of Americans don't know, and not just Americans, I'm sure if you polled any Western country, it would come out this way. The majority of people have no idea what dire implications that would have. If we enforced a no-fly zone, that means we need to engage Russian planes, and that means that we're basically essentially at war with Russia. They're going to start targeting airstrips in the surrounding countries, and it's on. And of course, then what happens is, if the United States gets involved, if we start lobbing some really heavy stuff into Russia, then that's when things get really sketchy. That's when Russia feels backed into a corner. It gets existential, and that's when the shizzy proverbially hits the fizzy. Now, remember, the military doctrine issued in 2014 states that the Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in response to nuclear and other types of weapons of mass destruction against it and or its allies, and also in the event of aggression against the Russian Federation involving the use of conventional weapons when the very existence of the state is under threat. We've seen that Putin has said that sanctions are an act of war, that sending heavy equipment is going to be an act of war. So it starts to look to me that we are essentially at war right now, okay? They're even talking about an oil embargo against Russia. You do an oil embargo against Russia, and we are essentially at war with Russia. I mean, we already are, just not on paper. But if you do that, then it's game on. Now, Germany is still holding out. They're still accepting gas and oil imports from Russia. Maybe they're waiting for a substitute. I'm sure Biden's going to get on the phone just like he did and to kill the Nord Stream pipeline, and he's going to be like, all right, yeah, and the guy's going to comply, and then tomorrow we're going to hear, oh, Germany decides to boycott Russian oil and natural gas. That is going to send the European markets into a tizzy. The price of oil and gas is going to skyrocket. The price of gas is higher than it's ever been before. Think about that. We may well see in the United States, you may well see $10 a gallon. You may well see $20 a gallon. Okay, especially if something flares up in the Middle East. Could you imagine if something flared up in the Middle East right now? How precious. I mean, they're already using the strategic reserve, and nobody's even really thinking about what that means, thinking about how bad that we're dipping into the strategic reserve. Now, they've done that before, but I think right now, at a time when oil is at a record price, gasoline is at a record price, the price of gold, $2,000, thank you very much. I've been telling you guys for months that the price of gold is going through the roof. It has to. Where else can it go? Okay, people, if Russia abandons the petrodollar and other countries follow in suit, and one of the most dangerous things now that could happen is that because countries are going to see that this is what happens when you cross NATO. And imagine, how can I put this? Okay, so all these other countries who do business in petrodollars and are holding all these dollars, they're going to see that, hey, these guys can throw us under the bus at any moment. So maybe we should have a escape plan. Maybe we should start to divest from the dollar. Maybe we should start to have a backup plan or build up our gold stocks or build up our crypto stocks or start buying other currencies. And that sets off a domino effect on top of everything else that is going on right now. So there's so much stuff to talk about here, guys. Did I talk about how Russia doesn't have as good of an early warning system? I heard Ray McGovern talking about this the other day, and basically it amounts to Russia's early warning system for ICBM launches isn't as good as the United States, and something to the effect of they then are a lot more hair-triggered when it comes to nuclear war. So the likelihood of a mistake happening right now is greater than it's ever been already. On top of that, there's this huge disadvantage, whereas the United States and NATO can detect when an ICBM is launched anywhere in the world within a few seconds, I believe, whereas Russia doesn't have that capability. So if you don't have that capability, and you know that the situation has gotten this tense, you may be inclined, more than the background in normal times, to push that button out of fear that you'll miss an opportunity for a first strike. So something to think about. We have Australia expediting the nuclear submarine base that they're going to be making there. We have China saying that they're going to be increasing defense spending by 7.2%. And China and the United States, China and Russia have basically solidified their ties with China's foreign minister on Monday, calling Russia his country's most important strategic partner. Russia is our most important strategic partner. Remember, China's GDP dwarfs the United States now, and it's probably going to double it within the next few years. If you have Russian technology with the Chinese industrial base and economy, and if those sides are working side by side, then that's something to really, really worry about in terms of, the Pax Americana is still fairly dominant. But if you get those two guys buddy, and even if you get India and China resolving some of their issues, then look out, because then we're in a whole new world of 1984 with Eurasia versus whatever the American one was. Now, Beijing continues to refuse to condemn the invasion of Ukraine despite growing pressure from the US and European Union to use its influence to rein Moscow in. Of course, we know it's going to do that. Now, Russia has warned that sending foreign countries to Ukraine will lead to a global collapse. I repeat, Russia has warned that sending foreign countries to Ukraine will lead to a global collapse. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, said Western powers sending mercenaries and military equipment to the front lines would be catastrophic. So they've already sort of made an exception with the Javelins and the other rocket launchers and anti-SAMs, or whatever they're called, surface-to-air missiles. They've made a bit of an exception with that. Okay, but it looks like now they're putting this red line in place, saying that if you continue to ship stuff, especially the heavy equipment, then it is going to be catastrophic. It will lead to global collapse. Now, we have this other story here of Russia having fired rockets at a research facility which contains nuclear material and a reactor. Now, this wasn't one of the nuclear reactors, and this is not the story that you heard over the weekend. This is something else. The alleged strike on the Institute of Physics and Technology in Kharkiv came on the 11th day of the invasion, with Ukrainian forces warning it risked a large-scale ecological disaster. So, because you have some of the biggest power plants, some with multiple 4 to 6 reactors in one of them, the biggest one that the Russians currently control, supposedly, even though the Ukrainians are still running it, but they're being held hostage to control it, things could go bad real quick. And if one side decides to sabotage the other side, like it's been suspected that Ukrainians are putting artillery batteries and various weapons in these high-risk places like schools, hospitals, and this is not uncommon. This is something that all countries do when they're fighting wars, because it's really bad optics when you blow up a school, but nobody knows that, okay, maybe you blew it up because there was, a bunch of guys in there hiding in there with missile launchers. But there's suspicion that they're putting weapons around these nuclear facilities with the hope of drawing fire so that they can bring in the international community and hope that they'll garner more support from the outside world. I'm not saying that is what's happening. I'm just saying that is what's happening. We also have the UN saying that food prices have jumped 20.7% globally year over year. That's just what we know. We know it's been more than that. But to have the UN say that food prices have risen 20% year over year, and now you have the biggest grain exporters in the world fighting with one another, looking at potential embargoes, sanctions. Russia and Ukraine combined to produce, I believe, 25 to 30% of the world's grain. Okay, you know that's going to be compromised. You know droughts, floods, and all of the other climate stuff that's going on right now is only going to add to the price. You have Russia, who may not export as much fertilizers. That's going to make things harder to grow in a dustier dust bowl that we find ourselves in. We know that, what else is going on? Yeah, okay, so of course you need oil for farm equipment. So all of these things are interconnected. So we are looking at some major increases in food prices, which is going to lead to riots in developing countries. You're going to see civil unrest. You're going to see civil war. You're going to see coups d'etats, military dictatorships. You're going to see things just flare up. And then when you have civil wars, that's usually when other countries get involved. And the conditions are just super ripe right now for a world war. Never have they been riper than what they are right now. And people need to prepare for it. I mean, look at the price of wheat. This is a little graph. I know you can see here, okay? So it was pretty high in 2008. This is when you had the Arab Spring. Now look at it. What do you think is going to happen if this keeps going up? Okay, we're not even in the growing season yet. Are they going to be able to grow anything in Ukraine? Obviously, they're going to be able to do it in Russia unless the war goes there. Could you imagine if the war went to Russia? I'm really concerned that nobody's talking about that. What happens when Ukraine starts to get proactive and says, you know what, we're going to launch some missiles at Moscow? I don't know if they have that capability. I don't think they do. But if they were given that capability, imagine what the outcome would be. We need to be prepared more so than we've ever been before to deal with the outcome of this. I never thought it would be this fast. When I made that video a few months back where I talked about I had a bad feeling, but I didn't think it was going to get this bad so quick. I mean, we're only in the beginning of March of 2022, and this is just crazy what's going on right now. So I would encourage people If you can get some land, get some land. If you can make a move now, because time is of the essence. And don't forget, enjoy that time with your family. I took some time off this weekend to just, you know, unwind, detach. I know it doesn't seem like that because I'm uploading all the time, but a lot of this stuff I do have help with, and it's videos that we shoot beforehand. But I took some time off just to chill, spend time, enjoy some of the finer moments, because this may be peak humanity. This may be peak civilization. These may be looked back at as the good old days. So enjoy every moment, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned. We have a video coming up for you guys later this week, which is going to be a very high production video where we look at everything you need to do from A to Z, from start to finish, to prepare for the shizzy hitting the fizzy that's coming down the rizzy. All right, guys. Thanks. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.